Battle of Midway, How 5 Minutes Changed the Pacific War. Chapter 1. Prelude to Midway. In the summer of 1942, the Pacific Ocean was the stage for an epic struggle. Just 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Empire of Japan had been striking from island to island, seemingly unstoppable. American forces were reeling, but hope was kindling in secret code rooms far from the battlefront. In the weeks before June, brilliant American codebreakers in Hawaii cracked Japanese naval codes. They discovered that a major Japanese operation was on the horizon, aimed at a tiny atoll called Midway. If Japan succeeded, they would not only conquer Midway, but likely destroy the remaining U.S. aircraft carriers. Yet, thanks to that breakthrough, the Americans sensed an opportunity. Instead of being caught off guard, they could set a trap. On the eve of battle, the stage was set. Japan's combined fleet, led by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, boasted 4 great fleet carriers bristling with planes. Across the Pacific, Admiral Chester Nimitz quietly marshaled 3 U.S. carriers, Yorktown, Enterprise, and Hornet, to Midway. Each side knew that whoever won here would swing the fate of the Pacific. Chapter 2. Operation MI, Japan's Gambit. Admiral Yamamoto's plan, codenamed Operation MI, was bold and intricate. Japan aimed to draw the American fleet out of Pearl Harbor and crush it, eliminating the one remaining threat to Japanese expansion. Yamamoto sent his carrier force toward Midway Atoll, intending first to bombard Midway's airfields and then land troops. Meanwhile, as a diversion, a smaller Japanese force would attack the Aleutian Islands in Alaska to lure the U.S. carriers northward. In Tokyo, commanders believed Midway was a perfect trap. The Americans would be forced to defend Midway, and the Japanese carriers could ambush them. The Japanese fleet was powerful. 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, made up the heart of Kido Butai, the striking force. They carried dozens of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes. These carriers were accompanied by battleships, cruisers, and destroyers for protection. Japan expected to face small Midway defenders and maybe lure the American carriers into a fatal battle. It was a complex strategy that hinged on perfect timing and secrecy. Chapter 3. Cracking the Code. Unbeknownst to Yamamoto, the Americans had broken his code. The U.S. Navy's Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor, led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, had been decrypting Japanese naval communications. By spring, they learned that a place called AF was the target of an operation. To confirm what AF meant, they staged a clever ruse. Midway sent a fake message about a water shortage. Japanese transmissions then repeated that AF had a water shortage. It confirmed AF was Midway. Suddenly, U.S. commanders knew exactly where and when Yamamoto would strike. Midway, around June 4th. Admiral Nimitz faced a choice: defend Midway and risk letting Japanese carriers escape, or attack the Japanese carriers directly. Nimitz chose to set an ambush. He secretly moved his carrier task forces into position before Yamamoto's ships arrived, preserving the secrecy of their advantage. The Americans even called their plan Turkey Shoot, a confident gamble. Nimitz's words would later be remembered. All it took was being 5 miles, 5 degrees, and 5 minutes off to set the trap that started the battle. Chapter 4. The Dawn of Battle. June 4th, 1942. As June 4th dawned, both sides sprang into action. In the gray light before sunrise, Japanese naval planes took off from their carriers. At 4:30 a.m., waves of Japanese dive bombers and torpedo planes roared toward Midway Atoll. Their mission was to smash Midway's air defenses and pave the way for invasion. Simultaneously, the Americans on Midway scrambled fighters and patrol planes. Even before seeing the enemy, U.S. pilots flew out to investigate strange radar echoes and search for the Japanese fleet. At 5:34 a.m., a U.S. PBY Catalina flying boat spotted enemy carriers far out at sea. The report blipped into Nimitz's nerve center. By now, it was clear. The trap was ready. Nimitz's carriers, steaming some 300 miles east of Midway, began launching their aircraft. Bombers and fighters of the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps climbed into the sky, heading westward toward the enemy. Vice Admiral Spruance and Rear Admiral Fletcher, on Enterprise and Yorktown, wanted action before the Japanese could even strike again. On the island of Midway itself, the Japanese bombers arrived with devastating effect. By 6:34 a.m., warplanes from the carriers stormed over Midway's airfields, incendiary bombs shredding runways and hangars. Anti-aircraft guns erupted, and a handful of U.S. fighters fought back valiantly. But Midway's facilities took serious damage. Despite the destruction, Midway's field remained usable. The defenders could still get planes off the ground. Some American bombers and torpedo planes from Midway launched in response, but these early strikes did little harm. The battle would truly turn on which side found and struck the enemy carriers first. Chapter 5. Torpedo Squadrons. The Bloody Charge. In mid-morning, the first decisive moves came from American torpedo squadrons. Embarking on near-suicidal attacks, these slow, low-flying bombers closed in on the enemy carriers. Squadrons VT-8 from USS Hornet and VT-6 from USS Enterprise dived into the mist. They flew almost at sea level, torpedo pipes churning toward the Japanese fleet like stone-cold arrows. Without fighter escort and heavy with torpedoes, the U.S. planes were like sitting ducks. Japanese Zero fighters sprang up from the carriers, chasing the torpedo planes. In rapid, tragic succession, one after another U.S. aircraft was shot down. By 9:30 a.m., virtually all of VT-8 and most of VT-6 had vanished into the sea. Not a single torpedo found a target. Only one pilot, Ensign George Gay of VT-8, survived to drift on a life raft, witnessing what came next. At the same time, a third torpedo squadron, VT-3 from USS Yorktown, made the final desperate run. 8 U.S. planes angled north toward the Japanese and pressed their attack. Almost all were destroyed as well. The brave crews had inflicted no physical damage, but they achieved something crucial. All this time, the Japanese carrier fighters had been busy felling American torpedo planes at sea level, far below. Their guns emptied and fuel drained, many Zeros were spent and low on ammo. By the time the dividers of fate arrived, the carrier decks were left relatively open above. The torpedo pilots, in paying the ultimate price, had unwittingly cleared the path for what happened next. Chapter 6. Dive Bombers. Clouds of Fire. As the struggling torpedo squadrons met disaster, a different sound filled the sky. Higher above, American dive bombers were arriving. In late morning, squadrons from USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown converged on the Japanese fleet. They had climbed above the battleship's anti-aircraft envelope, searching blindly in the haze. Fate led them by their instruments into the heart of the enemy formation. At roughly 10:20 a.m., all 3 American dive bomber squadrons, collectively some 90 dauntless planes, dropped toward targets. In a phenomenal moment of timing and fortune, they struck simultaneously. Aircraft roared toward the decks of Japanese carriers, split seconds apart. The first squadron dived on Akagi and Kaga. A second pressed into Soryu. Bombs plummeted like shooting stars. The effect was cataclysmic. On the carrier Kaga, multiple bombs pierced armor and splashed fiery guts across the flight deck. Gasoline tanks ruptured, igniting massive infernos. Akagi took a near miss that detonated stores of fuel, sending columns of black smoke skyward. On Soryu, bombs tore through hangars, triggering chain explosions. Within minutes, all 3 carriers were ablaze. Firefighting crews were overwhelmed. Ammunition hoists exploded. The ships began to list. By 10:30 a.m., Soryu and Kaga were lost, ablaze from bow to stern. Akagi, though still afloat, burned so fiercely she had to be abandoned as well. For these precious few minutes, the battle had turned on a knife's edge of chance and bravery. Chapter 7. 5 Minutes of Fury. In those thrilling 5 minutes around 10:20 a.m., the fate of the Pacific hung in the balance. Yamamoto's proud carriers were crippled beyond hope. 3 out of 4 were fatally wounded, gone up in smoke and fire. Every bomb that hit was a note in a symphony of destruction. Decks shuddered, hangars collapsed, and explosions gutted the enemy's heart. Amid the chaos, American dive bombers pulled away, escaping the last bursts of machine gun tracers. By the time the smoke cleared, Spruance's voice crackled on the radio, calm but triumphant. The U.S. carrier's assault had succeeded beyond all expectations. The Japanese carrier strike force had been decimated in mere minutes. This was the turning point. Any slightly different outcome, a few seconds later, a minute earlier, and perhaps the Americans might have missed their opportunity. But on June 4th, 1942, it all lined up. What one amazed U.S. pilot later called the largest concentration of explosions I have ever witnessed was the immediate result. Yamamoto's plan to ambush had wildly backfired. Instead, the hunters had been caught and destroyed by those they thought were the prey. Chapter 8. Counterstroke at dusk. The Japanese fleet was stunned, but it still had one final move. The surviving carrier, Hiryu, had remained hidden to the north. As the smoke drifted from the broken carriers, Hiryu launched a furious strike back at the Americans. Late in the afternoon, torpedo and dive bombers from Hiryu swept toward the U.S. fleet at Midway. They found the damaged carrier USS Yorktown limping at low speed. With sudden precision, Japanese bombs and torpedoes slammed into Yorktown's decks. 3 bombs blasted through her flight deck and pierced her boilers. The Yorktown shuddered, power was knocked out, and her speed dropped to a crawl. But American damage crews were exceptionally brave and skilled. Within an hour, they had patched the worst holes, restored enough power for 30 knots, and started some boilers. Yorktown raised steam again and signaled an American flag still flying on her bridge, a defiant sign. She was still in the fight. An hour later, Hiryu sent a second wave. This time, 3 torpedoes smashed Yorktown almost cataclysmically. Flames shot from her hull. This blow was mortal. Captain Buckmaster ordered "Abandon ship." Yorktown slipped beneath the waves on June 7, 1942, the last major casualty. Meanwhile, American pilots from USS Enterprise finally spotted Hiryu on June 4th and pounced. In the late afternoon light, squadrons of Dauntless dive bombers and Avenger torpedo bombers once again dived on a Japanese carrier. Bombs slammed into Hiryu's flight deck, starting uncontrollable fires. By sunset, Hiryu too was mortally wounded. Her pilots evacuated or surrendered as she burned and slowly sank. Hiryu's valiant Admiral Tamon Yamaguchi chose to go down with his ship. By dusk, all 4 Japanese fleet carriers were gone. Chapter 9. Aftermath. Turning the tide. When the guns finally fell silent, the Battle of Midway was over. In 4 brutal days, the outcome was unmistakable. Japan had lost all 4 of its powerful carriers, thousands of seasoned crew and pilots, and the initiative in the Pacific. America's losses had been heavy, the carrier Yorktown and nearly 150 aircraft, but far outweighed by the victory. The U.S. now held the upper hand. The imperial juggernaut that had marched across the Pacific was halted, even rolled back. Admiral Nimitz telegraphed home with understatement. God must have been on our side. From that day, the war shifted from Japan's offense to America's counterattack. Within weeks, U.S. Marines landed at Guadalcanal. American shipyards churned out more carriers and planes. Japanese forces, exhausted and stripped of irreplaceable veteran pilots, were on the defensive. It truly came down to 5 minutes. 5 minutes of perfect timing that changed history. In the larger tapestry of World War II, Midway's brief flare of action rewrote the ending. Without intelligence secrets known only to a few, without the courage of doomed torpedo pilots, without that perfect strike by the dive bombers, who knows how much longer the war might have raged, or how many more islands might have fallen. Instead, Midway became legendary, studied as the moment when luck, skill, and willpower collided. Chapter 10. Legacy of Midway. For decades, historians have marveled at Midway. It is a tale of astonishing bravery, shrewd strategy, and razor-thin margins. After Midway, Japan could never regain its naval supremacy. The United States, buoyed by victory, advanced across the Pacific on a path that would end in Tokyo Bay in 1945. In a classic image, Admiral Nimitz later walked among the surrendered Japanese fleet, humbled by the destruction wreaked in those 5 minutes. Codebreakers who toiled in silence saw their work change millions of lives. The Battle of Midway stands as proof that in war, even the grandest plans rest on moments of fate. And in June 1942, 5 minutes was all it took to change the course of the Pacific War forever.